Everybody, and welcome to another edition of Every Rockie Ever, a Colorado Rockies podcast, part of the Rocky Mountain Rooftop Network, a proud member of the Fans First Sports Network. I'm Skyler Timmins, and joined always here with my older brother, Dustin. And how you doing, Dustin?
Pretty good. Pretty good.
Pretty good. We're rolling right along, as always, talking about the Rockies. And when we were prepping for this one, Dustin was telling me that let's get one that you can gush about because the people kind of might get tired of listening to me.
Oh yeah, because I can go from the '93 all the way to now, and so for those older Rockies, I don't want to be babbling on forever about them. So we can sprinkle in some of these later generation guys.
Yeah, the the ones that are in more of my department, and I think that's why we kind of, when you asked me which one I wanted to do, one I settled on was probably one of my favorite Rockies and just one of my favorite players of all time, and it's one Michael Cuddyer, the short-lived Rocky for a couple seasons, but he's one of my favorites, and you'll probably hear me gushing about him here a little bit. But I'll throw it to Dustin here, as always, to kind of give us the rundown on one Michael Cuddyer of his career.
All right, Michael Cuddyer, primarily a right fielder, but he dabbled a little in first base. Unfortunately, a little in third base. Right-handed bat, right throwing, 6'2", 220 pounds, from Norfolk, Virginia. He's a big time Virginia product, one of the best that's come from that state. Everybody knows him from the Minnesota Twins. He was drafted the first round in 1997, and he made his major league debut in 2001. He was 22 at the time, and got a hit in his debut against Cleveland. He played his last game in October 3rd of 2015, and that's when he was a member of the Mets. But with the Rockies, he played 3 seasons with them from 2012 to 2014. And during that time, in 2013, he was an All-Star, finished 20th in the MVP race, and was a Silver Slugger. And one more thing, he won the batting title that year. So 3 solid years. He played 11 years with Minnesota. That's why everybody thinks Michael Cuddyer in Minnesota. Colorado for those 3 years, and with the Mets, just the 1 year.
Mm-hmm. Right on. So pretty nice career, 15 years and everything. And he ultimately stepped away from the game after that 2015 season, mostly because of injuries. His body just wasn't up for it anymore. But he got his trip to the World Series with the Mets there in 2015. But before we get into, I guess, to my history with him, were you pretty aware of Michael Cuddyer at all before, like leading up during his time with the Twins there in the mid 2000s?
Yeah, that's what for me, when I always think of Michael Cuddyer, it always goes to Minnesota Twins. Those days when it was Joe Mauer and Justin Morneau and Michael Cuddyer. Those Twins teams in those early mid 90s or mid 2000s, they're pretty solid.
Mm-hmm.
They were some really good teams. They never made it to the World Series, never really won anything, but they were competitive. Oh, Johan Santana, Francisco Liriano for the pitching side of things. They were good, and Michael Cuddyer was a big part of that. Just a solid, hard-nosed ball player. And as you get to know the man, he's a well-respected baseball guy, and the way he went about it. And so that's something that I always liked about him, especially with the Rockies. That human element of things. Yeah, sure, we want that performance. We want it on the field, but then what do guys do outside of that? And I think one of the biggest things that I always think Michael Cuddyer is the lesson he learned from Harmon Killebrew,
Mm-hmm.
one of the all-time Twins players, is when you are asked to autograph a baseball or something, write your name legibly. Like have a nice signature, not just a scribble. And that was
Mm-hmm.
something Michael Cuddyer always, he took that to heart and preached that. And I think that's just a real big thing that shows who he is as a person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and no, those influences of Harmon Killebrew. That's why he wore number 3 with the Rockies to honor Killebrew when he joined the Rockies, because his old number 5 was taken with the Rockies at the time. So he chose number 3 in honor of that, and that's what I always think of as how good of a guy he was. He's like the epitome of good clubhouse guy that the Rockies have always been looked for. Teams just love him. He's just a good example, a good human being. Uh, with take the baseball away, he's still just an incredible person, and super nice guy. And it's awesome that he was able to be in a Rockies uniform, because when I think of just all-time great baseball guys, human beings, I think of Michael Cuddyer. Oh, he's just a likable guy. There's really nothing you can really hate about him. And I'm sure you'd be hard pressed to find anybody in the baseball world that just loathes Michael Cuddyer, aside from the pitchers he just raked against.
You know,
But I think for me, what he really popped on the radar for me was in 2011. I was a freshman in high school, and I was bored one day. I was like, I want to play fantasy baseball. And this was back when MLB.com itself actually had its own fantasy baseball you could play right there, before it just became ESPN or Yahoo fantasy baseball. And so I signed up. I was like, oh, I'll play just for the fun of it, because I've always wanted to play it. And so I was playing fantasy baseball on MLB.com. And at some point during the season, like, oh, I need somebody better on my team. Oh, who's this guy on the Twins? He's kind of versatile. He can play a couple of positions, and he's doing good. Oh, Michael Cuddyer. Oh, sure, I'll put him on my team. And then just over the course, so this is probably over the course of 2011 season, I kind of started to just fall in love with this player. Of, man, he's doing really good for my team, and I can put him anywhere. He's just getting me points. And I think I finished somewhere in the top 5 in that random MLB.com baseball league. But it really cemented. So when he became a free agent after 2011, I was like, oh man, the Rockies should get Michael Cuddyer. That would be awesome, because this guy's a good player. And then lo and behold, they actually did sign him to a 3-year deal, because I guess his production was kind of low with the Twins there in 2011, or it was starting to trend downward. They wanted to get him back at a reduced salary, and they tried to up their offer a little bit, but they couldn't come close to the 3-year, like $31 million the Rockies offered him. And so he chose to go to the Rockies and leave behind that team he had been with for 11 years and try something new with the Rockies. And man, I remember I came into school the next day after I saw the news, and I was pumped. I told one of our one of the old teachers, at the high school that we both went to, Mr. Reed. I remember going into his room, and I could always talk Rockies baseball to him, and just kind of celebrating, like, yeah, they got Michael Cuddyer. Man, this is awesome. I'm happy about this. He's going to be so good for us. And it was, I was pumped. That was probably the first time for me that I was really excited about a free agent signing for the Rockies, because I was diving deeper into following the Rockies. And that was probably my first free agent of the Rockies. Got somebody that I was really excited for, and that's my free agent, my guy that I was rooting for.
that's one of the few
Mm-hmm.
anybody was like, "Dang, that's a really good pickup." because they don't have a great history of that. But that's it. I have yet to have one of those like that's the guy I want and have them sign him.
Hmm.
But or if they could have made that trade and got this, that, and the other. But the Michael Cuddyer one it's a good one.
Hmm. And so it's kind of cool to see him in that first season in 2012, as abysmal as that season was for everybody. Played in 101 games, dealt with some injuries. He was 33 years old, so you're not expecting a ton out of him, but just kind of a serviceable right fielder who's just a good veteran presence to have. But still threw out a pretty decent year, 260 average, slugging 489, was getting on base 317, but still went. We'll get into 2013. He was just that epitome of a professional hitter to me, of just nice, easy mechanics. He was just a solid at bat every time. And no, you could, despite the injuries, he was still, I think the majority of hits, or like 38 of his hits, were still for extra bases. He threw out 16 home runs, 58 RBIs, 30 doubles. So he was just a solid hitter at the plate with some serviceable defense in right field at Coors Field.
Oof. I do remember that.
Yeah, it wasn't great, but it was fine. But yeah, it was just that first season. I was just, when he was healthy and on the field, I just loved watching Michael Cuddyer hit, and it was it was pretty awesome because he just seemed like that contributor that you mentioned, the good solid guy. When I think of him, he's, when you think of guys that, they played the right way, they played the game hard, they worked hard, and they just played the game right. Michael Cuddyer is the epitome of that for me. When I think of guys that play the right way, how to play the game of baseball the right way, it's Michael Cuddyer. He's hustled, put the nose to the grindstone, and just works. While not being, arrogant or a jerk to anybody.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing too is even when I coach baseball or I coach soccer now and guys get all bent out of shape if they're playing out of their position and we got these little kids that are like, I am this position only. And when they get put in, it's like, we're coaching ball players here.
Mm-hmm.
A ball player would go and give 100% effort at any position, even if they may not know all the ins and outs of it, but they want to play ball. And I
Mm-hmm.
think Michael Cuddyer was one of those, and we saw that with the Rockies. They needed, hey, play some first base. He would have no problem doing that. Did it look pretty? No, but he would do his best, and it was all right. Eh, we need a third baseman. Unfortunately, he said, I can do it, and that we'll probably hit on that later. But a guy that's out there, he's got those extra gloves, those extra mitts in his bag in his locker, waiting for the chance. I got that first baseman's glove; it's ready to go,
Mm-hmm.
and at any time, the manager, Cuddy, go play some first base,
Mm-hmm.
and that's something I always enjoyed. I love seeing those kind of players that could bounce around. Maybe I see a little bit like that's how I always wanted to play. I never really felt like I pitched. I was good at it, but in JV and sophomore in high school, I always wanted to be that player that could get to almost all the positions in a game. I couldn't
Mm-hmm.
do catching; that was out of the picture.
Mm-hmm.
But playing all the infield spots, knowing how each one of those spots works out in the outfield, uh, getting up on the mound a little bit, whatever it was, but being out on the field. And this is just one of those guys that I could picture myself like that's the kind of guy that I would always wanted to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's kind of the defensive versatility was something huge for Cuddyer. It's 2014. he needed a third baseman. He played 3 games at third base. Then I think he ended up diving on a play. And that was the first time he had played third base since 2010 in Minnesota. No, ended up jacking up his shoulder and had to get surgery. Missed a ton of time in that final year of his contract. But the versatility, he was always a team first kind of guy. And that's what you always appreciate in a ball player. The Rockies have had a lot of guys that have been team first guys. There's been guys that have been me first type of players, but you've had so many that have been team first type of guys. And so Michael Cuddyer was. And that whole contract really paid off there in 2013 when played 130 games, probably one of his career years at the age of 34, was an all-star, won the Silver Slugger in right field, competed in the home run derby that year, and won the batting title with a 331 average. There probably was, I don't know if that was one of those years where there was a little bit of controversy with how Walt Weiss handled the old batting title, but that
There's
2013
controversy.
Yeah. The 2013 season was probably the epitome of his Rockies career. 20 home runs, 84 RBIs, 46 walks, 100 strikeouts. Had a 919 OPS, which was a career high. That was the best of his entire career. And I think we were looking, it wasn't just at home, Dustin. This is one of those rare occurrences where he was raking on the road as well while taking advantage of Coors Field. Let's see, it was in 2013. He was hitting 356 at home, had a 311 average on the road, and still a good, maybe about 6 or 9 home runs on the road, but still solid hitter no matter where he went. So with his approach, he had that nice solid approach that it worked no matter where he went.
That's Todd. Anytime you're almost in that realm of Todd Helton stats, especially on the hitting stats on the road, man, you wish you could just I don't know, have that in the instructional video every season. All right, fellas, you want to hit on the road? We got to do this. Play play the role, play the reel of Michael Cuddyer, 2013.
Yeah, and there was that 2013 season was so exciting because what really helped it is he started that season, or at some point in that season, he had a 27 game hitting streak that only lasted one season. It was a franchise record until Nolan Arenado beat it the next year with a 28 game hitting streak. But I remember going, I think I might have gone to a game with our other brother. I think I went to it, and that's when Cuddyer was in the midst of his streak or getting close to taking over for the franchise record. And I remember I had a sign that I made, "Cuddy is my buddy."
I was there for that.
Yeah, I think we might have been there for that. And no, it was, yeah, Cuddy is my buddy. And I think I remember him, he's just always just throwing out hits all the time, and 27 game hitting streak with getting halfway to DiMaggio's record. It's pretty exciting to watch, where there's this no-name 34-year-old that's just kind of an afterthought on the Rockies roster doing these great things and writing his name in the record books.
Oh yeah, and I remember that because we ran over after the game to the broadcast, the post game, and we were standing off the side. We were supposed to be recording it on the DVR or whatever, the satellite, that would record stuff. And either it didn't record or the programming was so we never had the actual footage of us right behind holding up that "Cuddy is my buddy" sign for the post game. But I do remember that one. And so a couple of people, that's clever.
Yeah. So he has the 27 game hitting streak, loses it against Clayton Kershaw July 2nd, but just a solid hitter that year, and ends up in his second All-Star appearance of his career. And that another cool instance there was him going to the All-Star game, and he got selected by David Wright because it was going to be at Citi Field or at the Mets. And David Wright selects Michael Cuddyer. That was when they had the team captains who would select their team. And he selects Michael Cuddyer. And the fits people threw when he added Michael Cuddyer. What in the world is David Wright doing adding this rando from the Rockies onto the home run derby team? It was pretty merited. Like, he wasn't a big slugger at the time, hadn't been for a while. But I love what David Wright, he comes out and says, like, when we have his home run derbies during the off season at his house, like, Cuddy sends him out. Like, he wins those things. And people were still like, he's not going to do anything. What a waste of a pick. There's so many better sluggers in baseball, and you choose Michael Cuddyer. But they're good friends out there in Virginia. And so Cuddy comes in, and the best thing, just the best justice he could do is he goes out, he ends up third overall, ends up in third place in the home run derby. I think he goes out, hits 8 in the first round, adds another 6 in the second round, and then ultimately loses and ends up in third. But the reactions of people on Twitter of who's this old man out here hitting just these tanks at Citi Field. And as a Rockies fan, I remember watching that, just rooting for him. Love watching the home run derby and like, come on, Cuddy, come on, you can do it. And he put on a good show.
Yeah, that's and it's funny to look back at this now, how these, even the All-Star game and how this stuff evolves. And that was probably one of the best, the best outcomes of a Rockies player in the home run derby. It's because they've never had that much, it's not a whole lot of success of our guys being in the home run derby. I had to remember that. And maybe it was a little foreshadowing of what would happen after the 2014 season.
Mm-hmm.
But, it's those little moments too that, solidify these guys are, in our minds of, how they create that important spot in our minds. And, like we said, sadly in 2014, he had the injury bug and all that, but he was still the baseball. He hit for the cycle in August of that year. And I remember that one being a big deal because once again, it's like this guy's, he's old and hits for the cycle. And he was just, when he did that, only the third player to hit for the cycle in both leagues. So he joined John Olerud and Bob Watson as the only 3 players to ever hit a cycle in American League and National League. And he was the only one to hit that season, to hit a cycle. So this is pretty crazy.
Pretty crazy too, because it gets forgotten because that was the day the Rockies retired Todd Helton's number. It was part of a doubleheader against the Cincinnati Reds, and it's his first game back from rehab, which I'll touch on his rehab here in a second. First game back from his rehab, hits for the cycle against the Cincinnati Reds in the nightcap of that doubleheader. And here's old man legging out a triple.
So I know everybody's like, "Don't get hurt trying to stretch that."
But what was cool leading up to that, with on a rehab, those minor leaguers, they probably better competition he could have gone to, but he chose to accept an assignment and choose to go down to, at the time, the Grand Junction Rockies, the Rockies rookie affiliate at the time. They're in 2014. And I love this quote that he had. He could have gone anywhere, had a pretty easy time against the pitching at that level. But he says he wanted to go down there because he wanted to set an example for the Rockies' youngest prospects. And he said for them to see what a guy in the major leagues is like, how he how he prepares will be good for them. And so he was thinking bigger picture there, which is cool to think. And guys that were on those 2014 Grand Junction Rockies, I actually might want to look those up. But thinking bigger than that, of he could have gone to AAA and just done that, but he decided to go at the lowest level, not so much for the rehab, but to get exposure to those young guys down there that just barely gotten drafted or are still fresh in the game. It's pretty cool to think. And then he, after he's done with that rehab, comes and hits a cycle. It's a pretty solid way to finish, to come off the injured list at the time.
Well, and I pulled up that Jonathan Daza was part of that group. Kyle Freeland. Let's see. It's cool seeing some of these guys. I'm like, well, they're no longer with us. Dom Nunez, and that's Forrest Wall. That's a name people have forgotten. Harrison Musgrave, Matt McBride, Rafael Betancourt did a little stint with them also. But those are pretty much the only. Sam Howard, some of those guys that did end up ultimately making it up to the majors. Kevin Padlow. So that's a real cool story, and I remember, a lot of those guys did that, that's what was cool when minor league baseball was still full of teams everywhere, and people, in Grand Junction had an opportunity to see, major league ball players come through for a few games,
Yeah, so he definitely left his mark in certain ways, and it would be cool to even ask any of those guys that are still with the Rockies or still kicking around, of what that experience was like. It would be cool to ask Kyle Freeland about that. But it's cool finishing out that 2014 season. Only played in 50 games, pretty much. Still had 10 home runs and a 332 average, for that season. So if he doesn't get hurt, who knows how good that final year could have been, and it could have, maybe set him up after that season. But 2014, with all the injuries and everything, Rockies did extend him a qualifying offer, which was kind of a surprising thing for people. I was like, why would you offer him that $15 million for Michael Cuddyer? Of course he's going to take it. But he decided to reject it, surprisingly, and then signed a 2-year deal with the Mets, and then retired after that 2015 season because he was just struggling, injuries and everything, and was just kind of a bench pinch hitter and everything. So his last really final everyday playing years were with the Rockies to kind of close out that career, and then becomes the veteran bench bat in 2015 with the Mets. But it's just cool to look back on his career and still think of, man, Michael Cuddyer was just a good, solid dude to have on the Rockies. He's never going to be remembered as a Rocky. He's always going to be a Twin. He's in the Twins Hall of Fame. He's never going to be on the Pantheon of Rockies. But for me, my personal Pantheon of Rockies, he's that guy that I always looked up to. Especially in those formative high school years for me, playing high school baseball. I was like, man, I want to be like Michael Cuddyer. He knows what he's doing, and I want to be like him.
Yeah, and then once again, I think every episode we're talking, and it hits all these different players and the importance that they've had on all kinds of different levels for people. And for Michael Cuddyer, he's that guy for you. And there's so many of these Every Rockie Ever that do that. And yeah, maybe they will never be remembered as that Rocky, that or Rocky, all these little things. That's for you. and that's what makes it special, and to
Mhm.
share those to share those experiences and things. And we also forgot his little clubhouse shenanigans of his little card
Sleight of hand.
trickery. Yeah.
Yeah. That's that's
So those are some of those cool things. Again, getting past just the on-field performance, and once again, these guys that are just regular guys that
mhm.
have their hobbies and their funny quirks and things like that. But Michael Cuddyer was a good one, and he's post playing career, he is still very involved in baseball.
Mhm.
Um, the last I saw that he was the coach for the U.S. Uh,
The
was
18U team, he's the
Yeah, the
manager
18U team.
for Team
So
USA Baseball.
that is awesome. What a great guy to be helping these young kids in their
Mhm.
baseball journey.
Yeah,
It's
the
pretty
future,
awesome.
it's there's nobody better you would want coaching, that level of baseball than Michael Cuddyer and set them on the right path. Make sure guys stay humble, but teaching them, about what it really means to be a baseball player outside of just on the field. You know, and he was that kind of guy. And think back all these memories of him going around doing his magic tricks in the clubhouse and on the street, MLB doing videos with him on the streets of New York, doing card tricks for people, or he'd always be posting, on social media, his photography that he'd go out and do all the time.
Yeah.
Uh, but then I was in that 2014 season when he was injured, still wanting to contribute in some way. He was doing pregame shows for the for the broadcast. So he was on there with Jenny Kavnar and Mark Stout and whoever else was doing it. He's there in his sling and he's doing pregame and pregame analysis of the Rockies because he just wanted to participate and contribute in some way if it wasn't on the field. No, and like we said at the beginning, he was the epitome of what I think of a team first clubhouse player for a team. And I think during those rough years with the Rockies, that he was the type of player they needed.
Well, yeah, that and just one more thing. I know we keep going, but he was also, when in his time with the Rockies, was a Roberto Clemente Award
Hmm.
candidate. So the nomination every year for the Roberto Clemente Award, and that's something that that's one of the coolest things that these guys do. These major leaguers, he made close to $79 million in his career, and to take that time, he had Cuddy's buddies. So there's your poster you made, but giving this opportunity for kids to go to baseball games, donating school supplies, and all that stuff that he did in the community, continues to do, is an awesome thing.
Hmm.
That shows that baseball, there's something bigger than just baseball.
Yeah, and Cuddy was a great representative of that. But I think that's gonna bring it to a close here for this edition of Every Rocky Ever. Talking Michael Cuddyer. I could always keep going on, but we love Cuddy. I always appreciated him being in a Rockies uniform. We specifically went to a game for a promotional giveaway as a family because they were giving away Michael Cuddyer t-shirt jersey, the jersey t-shirts. I don't think I have it anymore because we all outgrew them, but he was one of my favorites, and I always think back fondly on Michael Cuddyer. And congrats to him with everything that he's doing with the USA baseball and everything. And would love to see him in a big league uniform one day. But I think he's content doing Team USA stuff. A lot easier, probably. We're a lot more comfortable and accustomed to that. But that's going to do it here. As always, we appreciate your feedback. Let us know on Twitter what your thoughts on Michael Cuddyer and everything and your memories of him. And until next time, you can find me on Twitter at sideline_crowd. And you can also find Dustin at Mr. T Spanish over on Twitter. now that it's summertime, less classroom shenanigans, but he'll be doing stuff around his house.
Yes, sir.
Lots of yard work to be done, as always. And you can find us on Twitter at Every Rockie Ever, and you can always go through the old tweets on there and look through, guys, and let us know what Rockies you want us to cover, because we're here with you, the fans, as well, and sharing our memories and connecting with your memories of these guys as well, because there's a lot of players out there. So somebody might have a memory of Fernando Abad eventually. I don't know who, but they will.
Not a good one.
But until next time, this has been Every Rockie Ever. Farewell.